Pedro from A&P-Reacts. I'm here today with Tomas Lindberg of At the Gates to talk about the upcoming record, The Nightmare of Being, out July 2nd on Century Media. How's it going?
All good here. Super hot here in Gothenburg today, but death metal weather. Yeah.
A little piece of hell, if you will, perhaps, as far as the weather is concerned.
Yeah, if you're a northerner, at least. Yeah.
Let's start off by talking about a little bit of the concept behind this record. Can you shed some light into the idea and how that idea came about that drove you to put this record together?
Well, I think there's two ideas, basically, the musical and lyrical idea. And we had some meetings, basically, about that, me and Jonas talking about it. We had this idea that the record would be very dark, very cinematic, very layered and textured and progressive, a lot of details. And then it was kind of in the same instant that I stumbled upon the concept by Martin from the band, actually gave me the book, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race by Tomas Lindberg. And I figured that would be a really cool concept to tie all those pieces that we talked about musically together, to make it dark, like searching, avant-garde, like a lot of those terms were mentioned when in the process. So that's kind of like how the marriage between the lyrics and music went this time. We always had this idea that they should all go together, like and conjure the same kind of emotions from the listener.
As you were working through the concept and as you're working through this record, did you find yourself being perhaps a little bit more pessimistic than normal because of where the record goes, or you're the kind of person that looks at everything from different angles and different approaches?
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of do that kind of research, you have to be open, both, in your mind and also open emotionally. And it's that basically there where the sort of say magic happens, if you're open emotionally to what you're reading. But I mean, what I basically found as an amateur reading upon pessimist philosophy, it's really not pessimistic. that's a bit of like a paradox there, but it's not about like having a bleak outlook on life. Just that it's so much deeper than that, and it has some really cool philosophical ideas that I found intriguing.
So it's not all about having the glass half empty versus half
exactly
full.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of like amateur vision of it being, person that is very gloomy. You can be pessimistic, but that doesn't mean you are a pessimist, so to say. I think it's just coming to terms with what we're dealing with here. How life, what are we looking at? It's a lot of struggle, a lot of suffering, and to live through that with your eyes open and taking it for what it is, that's basically a positive outlook in life in one way. Mm-hmm. Optimistic views are more prone to be disappointed and have more pain and suffering in their life, actually.
I tend to agree with that philosophy, with that way of thinking. You mentioned that this record goes a little bit into a different arena. It has a little bit of that avant-garde, a little bit of prog. I actually felt like there was a lot of prog on this record, perhaps more so as you progress down the line, as you get deeper into the album. So did this change, or did this slight change in sound and approach impact the way you guys created the record from a creative perspective?
I think we had these ideas to go a little bit deeper into the progressive elements of the band, the orchestrations and the different kind of arrangements, and which musical instruments to use for certain parts and so on. But I think we're at the point now where we're kind of like so secure in our knowledge about what At the Gates is and should be, so we can experiment without actually leaving that part, because it still has to sound like At the Gates, and that is the main challenge of this record, to make it sound like At the Gates, even though there's a lot of more to it. I mean, we had progressive elements even from the start, but at that time there were more youthful naivety at play, whereas now we can look back on a career and we have knowledge about songwriting and musical theory and stuff like that we can incorporate these ideas with a good sense of dynamic, but without losing the red thread of the song. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be difficult to listen to. It should be challenging and intriguing, but not difficult, you know?
Yeah. Considering this change or this approach that you guys took to this record, was that the most difficult aspect of the album, or is there something else that was difficult for you guys to transport from the creative process when you're brainstorming to the actual realization of what you want as the end result?
I think here actually the pandemic came into play a little bit because it gave us such more time to focus on the record, and letting go of some songs for a month or two and then going back to them with open minds and then exploring them further, stuff like that we wouldn't have had time with, or they even gotten the idea, but we were so we were bored basically, so we went with it. But also, of course, like the demo versions of the songs, like the pre-production versions, they're made by us at home, so to say. You can't hear all the details there, so that was a challenge, because me and Jonas knew, like, there's a little part there that we don't hear, but we will make Jens let it tear through the layer of guitars or whatever, So I think the mixing process was the most arduous part of it, actually. Having a full album, like a full sound that you're kind of stunned by, hopefully, but still you hear all the different details at the same time. That's a hard thing to get at the same time.
Yeah. Getting into the structure of the album, I think you guys did a phenomenal job, and maybe this is me seeing something where something doesn't exist, or perhaps it is there, but I love the fact that you guys started off with Spectrum of Extinction and The Paradox as the two opening tracks, the two singles, but the two opening tracks on the album. I felt like these two tracks had a little bit more of the traditional At the Gates sound and approach, and then as you start going down the line, you start to see growth and an evolution of what you guys have to offer down the road. Was that on purpose in order for us, the fans, to feel a little bit more at ease coming in, and then we don't even notice the changes happening because we're already so deep into the record?
I don't know. I mean, we're an album kind of band, so we are writing albums and are very meticulous about the sequencing of the songs, stuff like that, to give a good flow, and also the dynamics across the whole, the whole album span. So it's always been very difficult to choose tracks for videos and singles before. We really don't want to do that at all. We just want to release the whole thing at once. But I get what you mean, and it might have been a joint decision. The label can also be part of those decisions, not of the album sequencing, because we still have total creative control. But as to singles, we ask people around, like, what do you guys think, and so on. But I mean, those two songs, the first two singles, are still, if you listen to them briefly, they're, as you say, like more classical At the Gates kind of songs. But we would never have been able to write a song like The Paradox in '95, because it's so much details. There's so much more going on. It sounds like a classic death metal song, but it has all those, some Merciful Fate vibes in the middle, some, because strumming guitar on the choruses. There's a lot of stuff going on that we didn't have the knowledge of how to do before. So even the more normal At the Gates song have been sprinkled with this new magic dust, so to say.
And I love that new magic dust. So what drove that? Was the concept that drove the need for you guys to include these extra layers into the sound, or did the idea for the sound kind of pushed the idea into the concept? Like, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Which came first?
Yeah, there's a constant discussion there between me and Jonas, and I think it boils down to, again, like the emotional impact that we want to give to the listener. And there, the lyrics and the idea of the musical parts of each song, they have to merge all the time. So there's constant discussion about where is this song going. And Jonas might suggest, like, what about this kind of part here? I'm like, nah, but that doesn't go with the lyrical theme, because it's, for that song, for example, it's more desperate, and that's a very triumphant part. It doesn't, we talk about that all the time. So, and I think that's how the songs grow. It's not like he writes a song and I write lyrics to it. It's more complex than that. I have to say, like almost a little bit post structuralist.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of an organic feel between you guys in terms of what do you need from each other in order to serve the song the right way.
Yeah, definitely. And we've known each other since we were like 15, 16. So we know how to talk to each other without, hurting each other's feelings when we basically tell the other guy that, no, you're wrong. But, we can do that. And, because we both are working for the same cause, the sake of the album, the sake of the song. So there's a duality there that's really good. He trusts me and I trust him.
The maturity and vision that we have with this new At the Gates record, is this something that you guys perhaps will build upon going forward, or is this kind of like a capsule in time of where you are currently?
I think every At the Gates album is a snapshot where we are right now, because if you go back in history, like every album sounds different basically. I mean, you can put them a little bit in pairs. The Red in the Sky and With Fear might have more in common than With Fear and Terminal, for example, but we never really know exactly where we go next. But of course, we are intrigued by the different orchestral part on this record, and also the more progressive / jazz fusion things that's going on. And
awesome.
yeah, and I mean, of course, we want to see how we can go with those things, but we probably want to take it further. You know what I mean? Now we learned it a little bit, how to kind of incorporate it. Can we push it further without, faulting like the fans? It should still be an At the Gates record. It should still be a death metal record with, with a bit more depth to it, basically.
Yeah, just keeping the DNA of the band as intact as possible and just adding a few things around the corners, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, because we're still, we are still the same death metal people that we always been, but we're just more curious, I guess, than
wiser
than normal. Yeah, but I think our listener base is all. Thank you. The listener base that we have is also curious. They also want to be challenged. So I mean, I don't think we, So I got some questions about that. Are you fearing losing some fans because you have a saxophone, or you have this like fusion part or whatever? We're like, no, I don't think the listeners work like that. I think they know what At the Gates is now, and they know that they will get a challenge every time they get a new At the Gates record, but they would be disappointed if they didn't get it a little bit,
Yeah, I agree with that view. I think the listener has grown with the band, and therefore the growth is not happening one independent of the other. They're happening in parallel together.
Exactly, and I think the death metal, or like metal community in general, or the extreme music scene community is they're more open-minded than they've ever been before, because of there's so much going on in the underground right now. So I think that serves us well, at the same time. I believe in our listeners, so to say. I have great faith in them.
I have to ask you about the guitar sound on this record. Did you guys change anything? Because I felt like it was the soundscape of the album in general works as one, but if you have to take one piece out of that soundscape, I was really blown away by the guitar work in general from top to bottom. Did anything change? Did you guys do anything differently?
Well, I mean, first of all, we worked with Andy LaRocque with the guitars on this record, and not just as an engineer, but also a little bit like a mentor and, a go-to kind of guy. If we have a part where there's a lot of intricacy going on, a lot of details and on different guitars, he would like help us how to play to get all those parts audible at the same time. And also with Jens mixing it, we talked to him before that we really wanted an organic sound. It should be very clear, because again, with all the layers and textures, but it shouldn't be like, it shouldn't sound modern, as what with reality was a bit too modern sounding for us a little bit, you know what I mean? Hence the sound on To Drink from the Night itself, which was more old school. But now we're kind of like in the middle. We found the part, this is like the organic sound that completes our vision a little bit.
As far as the lyrical content on this record, is there something specifically that you're hoping fans can take away from the album, or are you just presenting ideas and and you're not really concerned with the individual interpretation that fans will take from those lyrics?
I mean, we have always had these like open for interpretation ideas since Ever with Reality came out. That's like we believe in the intertextuality and like that the reader or listener is actually giving birth through their own art while reading or listening to it, and I think that's important for us. But I mean, of course, there is a concept. We're dealing with a philosophy here that was pretty much a little bit unknown for me. So this is like my thoughts upon it, really, like my ideas, some things that I thought were this is cool, and stuff like that, and also my emotional journey reading about this. So I just basically, if someone is interested, these are like some of the ideas that I stumbled upon, like more like a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation about pessimism.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a PowerPoint presentation and a starting point as well.
Yeah, and I mean, with At the Gates, it's always been the same. I mean, the lyrics still sounds like death metal lyrics. You can just, if you just want to get a beer, bang your head, and listen to some death metal, you'll hear the words, the death metal words. You know, this is cool. If you're going to go further, we can, which books did Thomas read this time, and and then some people do, and I think that's really cool. But I'm not trying to like turn people over to pessimism. That's not my point.
That's not your goal. How much work do you put in preparing yourself vocally for an album like this? Is there a special regiment that you put yourself through?
I think with this album, I noticed pretty early on when doing the demos that there's so many different kind of vocal textures I need to figure out. I can't just go in and do it. It has to be thought out. I need to like these songs I record on that day and so on, because there's a lot of different pitch also on the different tracks. I can't just, because even if it's death metal vocals, there is different, there's actually tones or notes that I hit actually behind the death metal singing. But so there was a lot of challenge there as well. And of course, some parts needed like spoken, or so there's a lot of different textures I worked with this time, and it was quite challenging actually. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. I mean, again, because of COVID, we could stretch out the recordings a little bit, so I had more time to go back and forward and try like, okay, this sounds cool, but what if I try to like a little higher pitch on this track, go back and do it again, stuff like that.
Was there a specific song that gave you perhaps some white hairs?
No, I mean, of course, I mean, a song like The Paradox would probably, that's going to be a challenge live, because there's a lot of words there. And that's a pretty challenging song physically to do. But otherwise, no, I think it's some of those tracks I was like a little bit more wary of, like The Fall Into Time. I thought that was going to be a challenge to find the emotions for that one. But that's basically a first take. So that sometimes you're just lucky. Yeah.
Sometimes all the chips fall where they may, and you
yeah.
Get the first take.
I mean, there's hard work behind it, of course, but
yeah, but still, you still have to nail it. So it doesn't come across that way as far as I'm listening. It just feels like, because there's challenges, and there's obvious challenges to the listener. You could tell. So it feels like there's a little bit more effort going into it. But sometimes the first take is the best take.
Yeah, I mean, it should be challenging for us enough to make us interested. I mean, we're 48, mostly all of us now, and to do this at our age, releasing complicated, complex, progressive death metal albums, then you have to really be intrigued by it. You have to be interested. It has to be important, otherwise we wouldn't do it. I mean, there's so much else I can do with my time, but we love doing this, and therefore we put a lot of effort into it, I guess.
Well, let me just say, like, you guys are aging like a fine wine. It's really like, you seem to raise the bar with every record, and you're always pushing the boundaries of what At the Gates can do with their sound, with their albums. And this leads me to my last question. As you had perhaps now some time to sit back and look at this record and see the work that you guys have done with this album, what do you feel is the major strength that this album has?
I would think that it's an album that you can live with a long time, basically, as a listener, I remember having a conversation with, Ulf from Entombed Despair some years ago when the new Swans record came out. I was like a week later, what do you think? He's like, no, but I didn't have a full day yet. I need to have a full day for that album, to listen to it and have nothing else to do. So I haven't listened to it yet because I don't want to listen like a song here, a song there. I need to, and I think that's a little bit what this album is as well. You want to, okay, I have nothing else. 5 hours. I'm going to go into this world. And I think that's the greatest part of this record, that you can just shut off the rest of the world and dive into a different world for a little bit of time there.
And lose yourself in it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Perfect. Well, Tomas, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. All the best for you and the guys with the release of The Nightmare of Being out July 2nd on Century Media. All the best. See you on the road soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Have a great day.
You too. Take care. Bye.